Hello and welcome to the Audiobook Club. In this week's episode, we're so lucky to be joined by the award-winning audiobook narrator and voice actor Sean Crisden. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. How are you today?
I am quite well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's my distinct pleasure to be here.
It's very nice to have you here. So I'd love to start at the very beginning, as we do with all these shows. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about your background and how you came into the world of audiobook narration and voice actor?
Yeah, picture it. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, United States, 1970-something. Two people fall in love, have very intimate relations, and was that too soon? Is that too far back? I'm not sure. My route to becoming an audiobook narrator is one that I typically tell folks, and they often look at me in disbelief. I have to preface it with the idea that I am fantastically lazy. Okay, so when you understand how lazy I am, in that I seek to expend as little energy as possible. So there's a bit of skill, I suppose, involved in accomplishing that. But I was working in corporate middle management, which definitely depletes the soul, and was also performing in a band. And I had I was chasing my creative dreams that way, musically.
Yeah.
Which I still have been known to bang out a wee ditty and yell with my guitar accompany me. But I was sort of at a crossroads when the band dissolved, and I didn't know what to do at this point. It was a large part of my identity, and I had a bit of an identity crisis at 30-ish. It was my early 30s. It may have very well been late 20s. Who knows? I'm not sure how old I am, and I can never pin it down, and I'll never admit to anything. And I also was sort of moonlighting as an on-camera actor, just to also take out some of my additional needs to create in some way, to do something that spoke to my creativity. And I was on set for a film that shall not be named because it was a terrible film. And those that know me know what the film was, and we don't talk about it. There is no film in Ba Sing Se. That's the only hint I can give for people that know what it is. They know what it is, and many of the talent there, the actors and actresses, were saying, "Oh well, my agent also gives me wonderful voiceover work, so I just get so much work." And I thought, this sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
So tell me more about this. And they said, well, you get a script and you read it and then you go home. And I said, well, wow, okay, this is appealing to my greater interests. And especially since with a lot of the on-camera work, there's a lot of early call times and memorization and blocking and hair and makeup. So it can be daunting for a person who is as lazy as myself. So I started to explore the idea of that, and it spoke to, I suppose, some of my earlier dabblings with just using my voice. I was a singer, of course, and also speech and the idea of language, which always appealed to me. So it all mixed together rather nicely, and I said, I'll try it. And that was November 2009 that I said, okay, let me give it a try. And I just poured all of my time and energy and resources into as much research and learning and talking to people who were doing this, and trying to find a coach and understanding what the path before me would be. And I actually got my first job, a paying job. Someone was willing to pay me to do this. Officially, once I decided, I had done one voiceover gig several years prior, but it didn't click with me. Not everything had coalesced in my mind of hey, I can do this, and it's okay. I can. It appeals to my greater sensibilities. And the first job was actually an audiobook. gig. So I knew nothing of audiobook narration. I knew nothing. I knew how to read a story. I had oftentimes read out loud in grade school to my classmates. So not completely far into it, but in a professional capacity, that was new territory. So it was certainly a question of, hey, can you do this? Oh, of course I can. Oh, yes, sure. Having no idea and relying on my capacity to hopefully figure it out before it was due. And at that, my very first audiobook job, interestingly enough, in 2009, was remote. So I didn't have to go into a studio. I already had recording equipment and engineering experience from being a musician, and had spent some time in a few studios, and am actually an audio engineer now. But at that time, it was, okay, how do we take these disparate items and make them work here in the audiobook world and make that work? So it was a learning experience. And my early books I listened to for fine amusement. I mean, most talent, I'm sure, are like that, right? You listen to some of your earlier work and anything that you've done, any skill you've learned or spent time honing, and say, oh, I certainly could have done that differently, to say the least. But that was my origin, and somehow people enjoyed my work, which I suppose is advantageous in continuing and making a career out of it. So it took off from there, and I've been going. I actually went full time in, I believe that was June 2010. So it was a matter of about 7 or 8 months of really diving in. I have the tendency to really dive in quite strongly when I cling tenaciously to my ideas and dive in and want to when I try to pursue something. So I was able to sort of fast track it, I guess, in a sense, to go full time, and have been going strong ever since. Fortunately, I've been quite fortunate in that regard.
That's really interesting. I think because that's not a long time at all, is it? From, just starting out to, or not just starting, because obviously you had prior experience and transferable skills from those activities, but to going full time into this narration, what was it about audiobooks as a medium that kind of sort of hit you and thought, do you know what, this is what I'm going to be focusing the next year of my career on?
It was a mix of the more noble path of, oh, I can don the mantle of storyteller and share in this experience that our species has adopted since the dawn of time around a dying fire to stave off saber-tooth attacks or what have you. So that, as we have passed our knowledge and our experiences and our myth through stories, so even before the written word. And I think that's a part that is innate within us as creatures, of being able to tell these stories and, coming through a more modern lens, looking at it as a form of entertainment and or education, as well as, oh, I can sit here comfortably and speak into a microphone and go on these fantastic voyages and journeys or relay this information from the past or possibly pertaining to the future. So all of those things spoke to me, pun intended, to really pursue it that way. And when we look at the lazy Sean Crisden, let's pull that model back into view, it was, relatively speaking, simple. Not to discredit or discount the amount of work and training and discipline that needs to go into being a proficient narrator. But relatively to, say, going down to the docks, tossing bananas onto a large boat, it was a simple job, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I get that. Sorry, that just took me by surprise. That tickled me.
Well, hopefully you would be looking should a large crate of bananas be coming your way.
Yeah. I think that may be the first time I've put a banana and a shipping all together in my brain. So, you've had great success in narrating a lot of content within the romance genre. What is it about romance as a genre that draws you in as a performer and keeps you coming back and wanting to, really operate in this space?
It's twofold, really. First and foremost, in terms of really most types of genre fiction,
Mm.
we identify particular beats and elements within them that create that particular genre that a reader or a listener in this case would expect to be fulfilled. It's sort of the agreement that they have with the content creator, the author,
Mm.
the narrator by proxy. So part of it is, who doesn't like a happy ending? Who doesn't like understanding that through all of the trial and tribulation that our antagonist will, or protagonist, sometimes the antagonist, I'm getting ahead of myself, will succeed, and that people can come together through adverse circumstance and find love. So that there is part of that absolutely appeals to me. It appeals to that mushy, sappy side of,
Yeah.
you can be dreamy-eyed, and that's wonderful. And on the opposite side of that coin, it is that predictability and that dependability in most cases. I mean, very rarely in the genre are we truly surprised or taken unawares by something that occurs. That creates a comfort zone, much like in most other genres of literary work and in most media. Of course, we come to expect certain things, and that's also presented itself as a challenge for me as now 12, 13 years plus into it. It has become so predictable that it has diminished my enjoyment of it, and I've actually stepped back a bit from romance. This is between you and I. We shouldn't tell anyone. I've recently stepped back a bit to take a breather from the romance genre, largely because I felt it was no longer providing the entertainment to me that, because it was so predictable. So it was a double-edged sword of understanding that. So now I'm dabbling out into other genres, including horror and suspense, which are some of my other personal favorites in other media as well. And a lot of nonfiction has been rolling through my booth. So I'm just sort of recharging my mental batteries from romance. And not to discredit it whatsoever, but there are times where I do need to be mentally challenged and surprised, much like a flying crate of bananas, to find something that excites me and catches me in a way that is unexpected. And there are some authors within the romance genre that certainly flirt with, pun intended, that idea of breaking the mold and changing the beats and creating these new exciting experiences that are completely unexpected to a reader and or listener, which I appreciate. But that's largely because here I am 500 plus books in, with easily 60 to 70% of those being romance, and just needing a break and or wanting to mix it up a bit.
Yeah.
It presents that challenge for me currently, which I know, of course, I'll return to it. I'm still taking romance titles. I just haven't taken as many as I have in the past. So I'm not going away. I'm just taking a break.
I think you are very well entitled to that break. That's really fair. I totally get where you're coming from. When it comes to accents, perhaps ones that are new to you, I know that you've done. Is it true that you've done a book in a Geordie accent?
Oh,
Is
yes.
that right? Yeah.
One of the most difficult, and I don't feel that I credited the Geordie accent well enough in that book, but it's a very difficult accent.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
As anyone who does not live in the region can understand.
Yeah.
And I had to basically narrate from that. I can't recall if that was first person POV or not, but the entire book was in a Geordie accent, and extremely challenging, especially for an American stateside. And it's a book that it haunts my thoughts on occasion, and not necessarily in a negative way. I do think my performance could have been significantly better. It was relatively early in my career, and yada yada, excuse. But I think I did well enough to convey the color and tone of it, without being too pedantic in what I believe I should have done for it. And certainly I would approach it differently today than I did at that point in time, that book. But it was generally well received, which ultimately it depends on what the listeners and the author feel. And I want to feel that I have honored my ability to narrate and convey the story and the intention of the author to the listeners. So I feel that was fair.
Yeah.
But boy, oh boy. Yeah, it's just it's always one, and I said, oh, he's talking about accents. I wonder if he's going to bring up Life of Joe. So it's always there in my brain.
My sort of ears quite picked up when I heard that. And it was because I live about an hour and a half away from the Geordie accent, and I can't do it. I've tried. I've been narrating audiobooks myself for the past sort of 5 years, and it occasionally pops up, and I think, can't do it, can't do that one. So I was very envious. You say that you've changed your process ahead of the narration process. Can you take us through the sort of steps on how you get accents down now? Has there ever been a project where you've maybe put off taking them because of an accent in there?
Absolutely. I have an advantage that I have a fairly large toolbox of accents and dialects. I do a lot of video game work and animation work where that comes into play much more readily than even in my audiobook narration. And in light of the current culture war, the woke culture, as it's been called here, of attempting to have characters in stories and in media that represent a more vast diaspora of the world at large, which is wonderful. Representation is very important. And also on the creative end of casting those things in various media, of wanting to have people who represent those ethnicities or cultures.
Yeah.
So it's sort of put me in a strange predicament of having a lot of accents and dialects and representing various cultures, and then choosing which projects to take. When they say, okay, we need someone who ideally has, this is a Namibian person who has moved to Germany. So you say, okay, that's interesting. How can we? And we want someone who has either lived in Namibia or is German or has ties to and you say, okay, well, how do we put this together? So I have definitely turned down projects, and even for me, I am mixed race, but for all intent and purpose, people look at me and they say, oh, he has pigment, he must be black. It's America. Woo, guns, pew pew pew. So it can be challenging for even for me, because I've played multiple ethnicities and people from various cultures, and it's always a question of, okay, so how do I fall into the idea of the overreaching goal of let's have greater representation in media, so that everything isn't just simply whitewashed, literally and figuratively, but then does that put a responsibility on me to then not play a 19-year-old white Southern Londoner, or to not play I don't know, I guess I wouldn't play an old Jewish grandmother. I don't know. Weird things have happened. But so do I accept that role, or do I let that role go to a person who more honestly in the real world represents that culture and or ethnicity? So it becomes challenging. But the idea of from a technical aspect of hey, here's a crazy, let's just a crazy accent. A person is just crazy. Can you do it? And I have to assess my ability and my skill and my willingness to also put in additional work. Um, as an aside, I think that accents and dialects, as I am a musician as well, it all relates to music for me because it's all pitch and tempo and rhythm and cadence and placement and then intent behind it. That's where I approach different accents and different dialects with those very technical aspects in mind. But then it's simply, okay, let's listen to it. And what is the literal musicality of an accent or a dialect? How does it sound? Where do the pitches go? Where's the placement in the mouth? What's the overall feeling that it imparts to when you listen to it? And that stuff is actually very fun for me. I guess it does speak to that musician in me, and then translating that to the mouth is an improvement. But for sure, to answer your question after all of that circuitous lip service, I have absolutely turned down roles that I thought, oh, that's one that I don't have in the toolbox, and in my current schedule, it would take too much time to get it under my tongue to be able to put forth what I would feel would be a satisfying performance or to honor it correctly. And, you know, taking a nod again to the current climate of let's have people who are those ethnicities and are from those cultures play these roles. I have turned down a great many more roles because I often encounter that, hey, he's a minority. This is a minority. They can do the thing, right? So it can be challenging. And I don't know if that's the same the world over. I mean, of course, America is a very racially divided and racially conscious country based on the way the entire country is structured, and of course that permeates our media. So I'm not sure. So do you find that that is the same for you there?
I'm not sure. I mean, personally, I get typecast as, you know, teen twinks. But that's I don't. Yeah, I think it's very similar. It's interesting. I think it just depends on who's casting it. I think there are amazing companies who are very serious about fair representation. Definitely over here. I think the big ones do care about that sort of thing, and it is moving in the right direction. Yeah, I would say yes, but maybe not as fast as it is over there. It's not, you know, maybe not as quick to adapt to the climate. That's what I would say. And I'm only speaking of the sort of smaller presses. The larger ones have sort of got it down, but that's because they're international anyway. With building a character with the accent, with the character as a whole, does that process change? Is there a difference between that process for you when, say, narrating an audiobook and then maybe voice acting for a video game or an animation? Does it differ in any way?
Well, that's a very good question. Not really. Fundamentally, the process is the same. However, one of the, I'll say just from my perspective, one of the joys of animation and or video game character work and characterization versus audiobook character work and characterization is that in a video game or animation, you typically get to go all in, meaning that it's usually this sort of hyperbole expressed as characterization. It's big and it's all-encompassing. Where in an audiobook, sometimes you're simply imparting a color or a tone to a character. Sometimes. Yes. Now, sometimes I really like to go all in audiobooks. I do. And it depends on the subject matter and the content and the tone of the narrative, of course. But I do recall doing a few fantasy books where there are monsters and demons and orcs and things. And come on. Of course I have to do that. Yeah, of course I have to go all in. You know, we're not quite, not that they can't exist, of course, but you don't want to, you know, hi, I'm an orc, and oh, I'm big and brawly, you know, oh, look at my rippling muscles, and I eat meat right off the bone, you know, so we, a lot of times, especially in fantasy books, I think I get to really kick in the afterburner, so to speak, and really embody these characters full-throatedly, if you will, and and make it a full thing. Where in other books, you're simply giving subtle color and subtle nuance to characters so as not to completely stomp all over the narrative with characterization.
Yeah.
It's a choice that needs to be made as a narrator of how you want to represent it, or if you're working with a director, that the director can help guide through as well. But yeah, that's for me, that's one of the main differences, is that for video games and animation, it's bigger. It's more encompassing than it is for an audiobook, because for an audiobook, in very rare circumstances, are we going to actually find ourselves shouting at the top of our lungs, at the top of our range, full projection. You know, it's often simply overkill for an audiobook as a storyteller. There are times where it's merited, but nowhere near as much as when I'll look at a video game session that's coming in. They'll say, okay, well it'll be 4 hours. You'll only be 2.5 hours on mic. There are some strenuous vocalizations. So okay, I get to rest. I'll bring my throat coat tea. I'll be prepared. So I can't say that I've had many audiobook sessions that have physically exhausted me in the matter of 60 to 90 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference for me there. But the process in creating the character, again, you talk to a person who talks for a living and then he talks too much. Let me answer your question. The process is ultimately the same in creating those characters and how I approach them. And sometimes, so here's the inside track for both creative talent and audiobook talent, and for folks who listen. Sometimes you feel like you have simply exhausted the options. I have a lot of go-tos that are, okay, these characters are here. They fit nicely in these vocal ranges with this texture and this cadence, and we slap that dialect on top. And easy peasy. Every so often, you get a project where you have to come up with something new. You have to basically create it from the ground up. And that process is sometimes can be considered slightly technical. Every then and again, I have had people ask me, well, how do you do it? How do you make these new characters? What do you do? And I look at it as music. First, when you look at a character, and it doesn't matter for me if it's animation, video games, an audiobook, when I understanding who the character is through a macro lens, and then we dig into the nitty-gritty of, okay, is this a male or a female? Is there gender? So we're looking at what is the tone and pitch of the voice that should be used to impart this character? What's the rhythm that they use to speak in? And what is the tempo? So it comes back to musical categorization for me that they use to speak. Okay, where's the placement in the mouth? Do they seem like they speak more to the front of the teeth, or is it up in the upper palate? Do they resonate through the face, or does it feel like it's in the back, or is it something that just drops down low to the chest? And where does that happen? And then after I have that, then I think, okay, what kind of texture is there to there? Is there any? Is it breathy? Is it gritty and gravelly? Is it pure and clean and pristine? And where is it? Then I think of, all right, what sort of mouth work is there on top of that? So is there a slight lisp? Do they speak out of one side of the mouth? Is it a lazy jaw? Is it a lazy tongue? And all of these elements come in. And then I will say, okay, where's the accent or the dialect that adds to that? So then that colors all of those other things. And then the final thing that I consider is the attitude, the persona of that character. And once you shake all of that up, nice and neat, then you get a character. And if you change one of those elements, it changes the character. So maybe not extremely so, but it changes it enough. So in a lot of books where you'll say, oh boy, there are 89 characters, and there's a scene where 46 of them are all in a room talking to each other. How do you differentiate that for a listener? And a lot of times we get the cues within the narrative. John said, Spanky emoted, these. So we get that to help sort of fill in the gaps, but you still want to have a listener be able to tell the difference in some manner. This one speaks faster. This one speaks, their tone is deeper. This one's more resonant. This one is breathier. This one has that weird lisp that they speak with. So, and then all of these things help to differentiate. So that's usually what I consider when I look at who is this character and what does it do. And a lot of times I have these sort of pre-made, pre-rolled characters, if you will, for D&D and video game folks that they're already there in the toolbox for me. I can just pull them out and go. And there's a danger in that too, in that a lot of my characterizations can sound the same if I'm not careful and in choosing something that may be unique for a particular book, which is difficult. I mean, after you do enough work, things are going to absolutely start to sound the same. I mean, there's no way to avoid that. But it's hopefully the way that you embody those characters and tell the story is entertaining enough for a listener to say, well, yeah, this sounds just like that other book he did last week that I listened to, but this one's still a lot of fun, so we'll handle it. So it's a lot of those things come into play.
I think that's really interesting. I think it's also going to help a lot of the folks listening as well. Most of our audience are up-and-coming budding narrators. The idea of working up through a character, almost really visually playing it out through the different, almost like a checklist of the different nuances of that, everything that makes up the character's voice that you can change. I think that's really helpful. In last week's episode of the show, I was talking to a wonderful narrator called and actor, Jennifer Aquino, who studies and competes in various martial arts. And we were speaking about how that can help with the temperament needed to narrate audiobooks. I read that you're also no stranger to martial arts. Would you agree that there's certainly areas such as the focus and the mindset needed for those activities? Do you agree that aids you when you're in the booth?
100%. Absolutely. As a lifelong martial artist, as permanent student, and sometimes teacher, the idea of, in most of your life, of being able to achieve a level of discipline, first and foremost, to accomplish a goal or a task, sometimes that may be quite daunting or seemingly impossible at times, and to commit to doing that, as well as the idea of focusing an intent and an energy toward that goal, not just haphazardly, but again, in a disciplined manner, absolutely helps. Because as most narrators know, and most budding narrators can imagine, narration, audiobook narration, long-form narration, this is the marathon of the voiceover world. So, I do a lot of commercials, I do a lot of games and animation and e-learning, all sorts of things. And there is nothing that I have to basically mentally and physically prepare for more than an audiobook session, which to some people seems strange because, wait a minute, didn't you just say that you never were exhausted by doing audiobooks? Didn't you say that, buddy? Yes, that is correct. But knowing that I'm going to be in the booth for 2 hours before I take a break, typically, sometimes less if I'm feeling extra lazy, but I at least do 2 hours of narration where I can go in and cut 2 30-second commercials in 15 minutes and be done with that task for the day. So I always refer to audiobook narration as a marathon. So you're in it for the long haul, and it's not something that you're going to sprint to the finish line on. So you have to be prepared to condition your body and your mind, a la martial arts, to stay committed to get through the finish line and then to keep moving, because it's not something where you can go in and say, okay, I did 20 minutes in the studio, I am done, time to go and just hang out outside in the desert with the scorpions and snakes. I live in the desert, incidentally. I think you may know that, but those things can be over very quickly. But the comfort for me in audiobook narration harkens back to what I said originally, was that you're donning the mantle of the storyteller. So you can swirl your brandy or your cognac in your tumbler, and you can sit in a lovely plush recliner by a crackling fireplace with ornate wood adorning the walls and shelves of ancient, deliciously musty smelling books. And you can then have someone sit in front of you and tell them a tale. You weave them a yarn, right? So there's something very, very different about that versus, on sale now, come buy this toothpaste. It'll make your teeth white and your breath will smell pretty good. So there's something different between the intentions there.
Yeah.
So narration is definitely difficult. It's the harder of those things, in terms of just what it demands of you. Even if you're just simply looking at it objectively and saying, oh, it takes a lot longer. It takes more time. But you have to stay focused, and you have to be consistent, and you have to have the stamina to last through it, which that ain't no easy thing.
No, I agree.
So that's what I typically like to tell folks. But it's a wonderful genre of voice work. If you can find your nice little cubby, your little niche or niche, and where it works well for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Your testimonials speak for themselves, and it seems no secret how much production companies and publishing houses, etc., love working with you. I always try to ask, have you any advice for narrators who are perhaps new in the industry on how they can make a great impression or have a higher chance of being asked back to work with these companies?
I do. I've coached a lot of folks on how to get closer to their goals, and more things than just narration as well, because a lot of these are universal ideas. But the first and foremost that I offer most people, especially as an American, is don't be a dick. So, and people find that challenging, particularly here in America. But there seems to be something that gets lost in terms of sharing humanity and empathy and the human experience of we're all living here on this rock floating through the cosmos. So case in point is, even when I would go into studios and for jobs, and when I lived in Los Angeles, I was always cordial and pleasant to everyone because that's who I am. Additionally, my martial arts training has helped to remove a concept of serving the ego, in the sense that a lot of people feel that they need to impress folks or create this inflated image of self, of worth, of just who they are, to present to the world, and again, to serve the ego so that you feel that you're seen that way. And again, me being miraculously lazy, I've reached the point in my life where I don't care. Not in a negative, apathetic way, but in that I'm simply going to be unique and authentically who I am, rather than trying to present myself as someone else. So there will be those that works very well with, and those that won't, such as life. But when I tell people, don't be a dick, do not be a prick, don't be a throbbing John Thomas, is that people can treat people poorly in their own quest to inflate their own sense of self. So back to, I would go into studios, and everyone, it was always nice, and I like cracking a joke. I like folks to have a good time. I like this. I think it's criminal that I get paid to do what I do. I'll say that, because essentially I feel like I'm always at play. But my goal was always to make sure that folks had fun, to solve problems, and to be easy and absolutely a joy to work with, and to share that experience with everyone else. Lofty goals. As I would often see especially a lot of the folks I knew who were on-camera talent, it seems the voiceover world is a little easier, but would be rude to the secretary or whoever the front desk administrator was, and just sort of short and curt and sometimes nasty. And I never understood why, especially when I've seen time and time again a lot of those individuals who were the receptionists in the studios or the casting agencies or wherever, they move on to become casting agents or engineers or prime decision makers who remember. They say, "Oh, I remember you, and we had a great time. Oh, it's wonderful." And obviously they remember the people who were jerks. So one of the main things is focus on your ability to relate to other people. Your interpersonal skills are very important, because a lot of this business, and it extends to other businesses and life at large as well, relies on your network and who you know and how they know you. So some people will yield to, "I must present myself as a grand visage," and all of these things. That, no, well, remain true to who you are, but be honest and treat people well. The golden rule comes to apply, kids. Treat the people as you would expect yourself to be treated, as you would want to be treated. And that's just the foundation of it. If you can do that, and of course there are sharks out there who will try to prey on new folks and steer them astray. Don't go in any dark alleys or dark woods with folks you don't know, kids. They promise great candy, but the candy sucks. Trust me. So it's just trying to be good and do good. It's usually what I tell people when I say goodbye to them. Be good and do good. Do that within your professional life as well. So be grateful for the opportunity to do things, even if you blow it. And the people that you meet, share joy with them, more so than angst or negativity. There's enough negativity in the world. So if we can bring that through our professional lives, then into our personal lives, maybe we can be onto something.
Yeah.
So that's usually what I tell folks. That's first and foremost. And then you can get into technical aspects of, okay, you have to adopt an entrepreneurial mindset. I tell people to use the Sporth method. So I'm now going to regale you with this, and I'm very sorry, because my wife said, "Are you telling them about the Sporth method again?" Yeah. So many years ago, I was asked to speak at a school, and it was a school in Los Angeles, an inner city school, to talk about how I did what I did. I also came out of the inner city in a rather rough and tumble neighborhood that the prospects for what you would do in your future were grim. We'll put it that way. So for me to achieve this level of professional comfort and success, whatever that may be, has sort of defied the odds. So when I spoke to these kids who were in similar circumstances from whence I had come myself, I had come from just poor inner city, I came up with the Sporth method. I needed a way to both quantify and qualify what I had done so that I could try to say, "Good luck, guys! I have no idea how so I could just say something that wasn't quite that. So I came up with the Sporth method. So the Sporth method is first, to get in the door, you need the skill. You need a very basic, rudimentary level of this skill. You don't have to be absolutely exceptionally mind-blowing, an outlier of the greatest ability. You don't necessarily have to be that, but you need to be able to perform whatever it is at its most basic, rudimentary level. So for a narrator, you should be able to speak and understand how to speak into a microphone. That's about it. I think that's the bare minimum we would require for that. So skill gets you in the door, S. So then there's P, persistence. So this also goes back to our martial arts conversation. If you fall down, you get up. You keep going. You keep coming back. And you instill that within your mindset that I will continue. I will fail repeatedly. I will. You simply will. Such is life. And what you do with that failure is very, very important. The failure can either completely roadblock you and be this insurmountable obstacle that you cannot conquer, and you simply walk away or give up. Or you can reassess, reapply, and readjust so that you can find another way to try to conquer that particular obstacle. It doesn't mean you will, but it's simply you're persistent. You every time you fall down, you get back up. Because if you don't get back up after you fall down, then there, my friend, you shall lay. So I always basically preach about persistence, my brothers and sisters, so that folks understand that it is necessary. So then we have O. So O is the opportunity. You need opportunity to present the skill that you've persistently been learning. So, but it's also an additional element of that is you cannot simply sit in your mom's basement and wait for opportunity to come to you. You have to create opportunity, in addition to hoping that the universe aligns for you. But you need to go out and be proactive in aligning the universe. You may need a mallet. You may need to tap a few screws here and there. But you need to discover ways to maximize your chance for being able to do whatever it is you've set out to do. You talk to folks, you tell folks about it, you explore various venues through which you can exercise this skill, and you do that persistently, and find ways to basically open your own doors. People talk, oh, the doors are locked. I go, okay, well, you can't open it. You can't open the lock. No, you can't kick the door down. Do you need to build your own door to go through? Can you possibly go through the window? So there's other ways to find these things. So opportunity, not only finding it but creating it. Then we have R, resources. So you need the resources to do these things, and there are those obvious tangible things such as time and money. There's this conference that's, across the country. I need to get to this conference. Do you have the time and ability to get there? Are you willing to go, to learn, to make these connections, or to learn this very ancient art of underwater basket weaving, whatever it is that you're trying to do? So you need those resources, and that also includes surrounding yourself with cheerleaders. So that's severing your ties to anchors that are weighing you down. All of the, you can't do that, no, you won't. Not only your own mental anchors that tell you cannot, but also those external ones, other people who say, hey, that sounds like a good idea. Because sometimes we just need a little bit of positivity, a positive push to help us overcome something or to get over mental hurdles. They're very, they're as real as the physical ones. I always have I call it the crushing specter of self-doubt riding on my shoulders, even at this point in my career. So that, I don't know if that ever goes away, but I know where to put him in just a little box, just right there. That's finding your ability to have the network you need of people who are peers, people who can be mentors to help propel you forward. All of those things are important. Finding your tribe, in essence, to help keep you focused on your goals and then keep pulling you forward, because it takes a village, I've heard, for pretty much everything. So that is the R for resources, and T in sporth is time. So very rarely will you find it be lightning in a bottle and happen instantly overnight. And I admit, even what happened in my career when I went from maybe I'll try this to going full time was certainly an accelerated time frame. And I also tell folks that, but for the next 2.5 years, I worked every single day. I did not take a vacation. I basically put in probably 10 to 12 hours a day between actually trying to do the work and then building the resources and the network and talking to folks and learning to do the work more efficiently. So there's certainly a commitment, a discipline we were talking about that's involved there. But it takes time. Expect that it will. If it happens sooner, great. What a pleasant surprise. But you have to simply expect that this is a lengthy process that will take a considerable amount of time. So put the time in. So that gives us the sport part of it, and the H is not just an unfortunate lisp. It's sporth is I have the H is hunger, and hunger is the one principle to rule them all, in that without the hunger to accomplish it, none of the other elements in the sporth method or anything else you're trying are really going to matter. If you go to the greatest buffet in the world, the food is legendary, prepared by some of the finest chefs that humankind has ever seen. It smells amazing. The people look satiated and satisfied, but you're not hungry. Or worse yet, you're stuffed. What good is this golden banquet of a buffet to you? So the hunger that you bring to your goals is what's going to help you build the skills, help you seek out the learning, help you remain persistent in doing so and doing all of these things, help you find opportunities, help you make opportunities, help you understand that, okay, I need these resources. I have to build a network. I have to find more people. I need mentors. I need people who are going through it. I need all of these things. And I understand that it'll help you to get up every time you meet rejection or a door closes in your face or the window because you were coming in the window. And so that hunger is the drive that keeps you going. It's the fire in the belly. It's what propels you to do what you must. Where I realized fairly early on in my life that I was a creative talent. If I did not create, and I went to school for visual art. I thought I was going to be an art teacher. Ha ha, joke's on me. That if I did not have the opportunity to create, then my soul withered ever so slightly until eventually I would be nothing but an empty husk. I had to create. I had to dive into some form of creativity. That was a part of me and an intrinsic component of who I am.
Yeah.
That helps to fuel that hunger for it. If that wasn't there, I wouldn't be doing this. I probably would be yelling at you right now to look out for that box of bananas that slipped out of my hands. It's, well, it's down the road. Just a horse and bananas. But so I never would have pursued this at all. So having the hunger and doing the self-assessment to make sure that you are indeed hungry for this, it's that it's not simply, I'll give it a try and see how it goes. It's, yeah, you can still find success that way. But when I basically conceptualize the sporth method is, okay, what are the ways that you can maximize your chances for success? You can still achieve without being hungry or without being persistent or having any skill at all. We've seen many people who have very little skill in their respective field that seem to do pretty well. Politics is one of them. But you want to maximize your chances. If you're going to do it, go big or go home, as the saying would say. So that's the whole spiel I tell new folks of how can I do this? Well, you can apply this to anything in your life. And if you have these components lined up for yourself, feel good that you're on the right path to chasing however you define success in that realm. Not that you'll get it, but you're doing your due diligence. So that's my whole racket. There we go.
Do you know, I must say I love that. I love the sport. I think that was really profound, and I think that's going to help a lot of people listening. I hope people have got the notebooks out. I'm still sort of digesting it. That really sort of hit a nerve with me, if I'm honest. Hit a sort of in here, and I think that was one of the best answers to that question I could have ever asked for.
So thank you very much.
I'm glad I was able to offer that. But it's for me, I'm the guy where my friends will often approach me and ask me these life-changing questions. How can I be like you? Or how can I be happy? And how can I... Because I tend to be rather simple in my approach to living. And not to say that I don't have my absolute moments of what I call being in the pit. depression is no stranger to me whatsoever, which I think is is also intimately tied with being a creative talent. There's just a part of that creative soul that tends to feel more. There's more of a an empathetic feeler out there, and then just an antenna that just sucks things in, that I seem to find with a lot of my creative friends. But I don't even know what I was saying. See, it sucked me right in. But the idea of sporth was, I said, well, how can I did do something. Something happened in my life. I made it this far. The assassins have failed up to this point. And I wanted to find a way to be able to convey, well, this is how I approached it that worked for me. Your mileage may vary, yada, yada, yada. But my life tends to be fairly simple. I'm not a big social media guy, as most people know. I have social media, but I have what I call a social media aversion. That for me, I found social media to be somewhat unhealthy and detrimental to my sense of self, and that I always felt I was comparing myself to other people in a hilariously unrealistic way, because everyone's living #best life when they're attempting to portray this persona and curate their own personal media, social media presence of who they are, which may not exactly jive with real life either. So, and we're all comparing ourselves to these simulacrums of people. So my social media is largely just, hey, I did this thing, or I'll promote a book or something. And even that is haphazard. I do need to be more consistent. I do love interacting with folks and fans, so I always answer emails and DMs and messages. But I'm pretty much an introvert. I say I'm a misanthropic desert hermit, that I just stay away from the people, and I stay in the desert in my crypt and pull the shades to not allow the sun. So, yeah. So that's pretty much me. But, you know, I just try to live a kind and just life while having a bit of fun, telling stories and making funny voices in my underwear.
Do you know, I don't think you could ask for a better one. I think that's a pretty good way to be. To be honest, I must say I've thoroughly enjoyed this episode. I've loved talking. I've just realised I've been sat here giggling like a schoolgirl the entire episode.
Well, that means we've enjoyed ourselves. I mean,
I've certainly enjoyed it.
Well, you and I may have, but the listeners are, oh, these two. If only they could see it. What can you do?
We've just have time for one more question, if that's okay. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. To finish us off, is there any upcoming projects, anything approaching in the diary that you're excited about, perhaps a project that we can look forward to as listeners?
Every single one. Let me pull up my calendar. I always tell folks, I said, I never remember what I've just done or what's coming up. I am a slave to my calendar, in fact. And part of it is because I dump everything into a project, and you live it in the moment, and then when it's done until I need to revisit it.
Yeah.
I've had fans and listeners say, oh, I loved this book with the thing with the stuff on the other. Oh, yeah? As I struggle to remember what it was. And when you read the line as she's dangling from the balcony, and you... oh yeah, that was super. I'm just trying to remember some of these things. I attribute it to my advanced age. Not quite, but so I just did a ton of books relating to not to necessarily regionalize it, but the American prison system, and some of the two different takes on it. One was a book called Beyond Innocence, which examined a man who was accused of murder wrongfully so, and served the majority of his life in prison for it, and was exonerated later. And it follows his story, a true story. Deeply moving, very poignant look at some of the problems of the American penal system in particular. And then there was another book that was This Life, which was actually written by a currently incarcerated man, but is fiction, and relays his experiences into fiction. And it surrounds sort of a culture of hip-hop and music within the prison system, and how individuals relate to that. That one was a lot of fun. I also did A Wop Bopaloo Mop, which was a history of Little Richard, the performer, which was a lot of fun. I learned an awful lot about Little Richard that I did not know. And I am wrapping up a series by one of my absolute favorite authors, and I've done a lot of her books, by R.J. Scott, who it was Summer Drifter and Winter Cowboy were the two of them. So good old I believe they're set in Montana cowboy love stories that are a lot of fun. If RJ's listening, hi RJ. And I think coming up, another heady, long nonfiction book, Martin and Malcolm and America. Again, back to, it seems everything's about America, which is a title that's looking at basically the events leading up to and the events after the result of the civil rights movement here in America, and the fight for equality from various sides, and how that has played itself out here. So those are a few that are coming up that I'm looking at doing. But then I look at the calendar, and it's just every week is a new book. So I typically do 4 to 5 titles in a month.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's quite a pace to keep up with as a narrator, and then to supplement that with additional items of video games and commercials and the animation that I'm doing. It keeps me very busy. So I'm very fortunate to be able to do this full time, and to have so many bits of the facets of the voiceover world that I can dive into and enjoy. So so that's some of the items that are coming up that folks may dig into, the Sean Crisden fans that like some of those things. But yeah, it's this has been an absolute blast. But see what happens, John, when you say, well, I guess we'll get Sean Crisden and we'll have him talk, and we'll see what he does. It's like you basically just open the gate, and I just pour everything out, and you say, okay, well, all right, that's the end of that, and we're done. So
honestly, you are the perfect guest. That is exactly what we need on podcast. It would be very difficult if you that was it. So no, I really appreciate it. And those projects sound fantastic as well. People should definitely keep their eyes and ears peeled for those. So I think that just about does it for this episode of the Audiobook Club. All of the relevant links to social media accounts and websites and such will all be linked in the description below. Thank you very much to the listener for making us a part of your day, and another huge, huge, huge thank you to Sean for joining us. Thank you, Sean.
Absolutely.